Greetings to all. In this video, I will be presenting on the topic energy flow in ecosystem. First of all, thank God and thank you Susanna ma'am for this opportunity. First of all, let's have a quick idea about what we are going to discuss today. We will have an introduction, then we will discuss about water cycle, carbon cycle, oxygen cycle, nitrogen cycle, energy cycle, and finally the integration of cycles. Ecosystem. It is a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. Every ecosystem has several interrelated mechanisms that affect human life. These are water cycle, oxygen cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, and energy cycle. Now let's look into each of them in detail. Water cycle. What is water cycle? Water cycle, also known as hydrologic cycle, is a biogeochemical cycle that describes the continuous movement of water on, above and below the surface of the earth. Now let's see why it is important. Importance of water cycle. It enables the availability of water for all living organisms. Secondly, it regulates the weather patterns as well as recycle water. If it doesn't happen properly, we would drain out of clean water, which is very essential for life. Now let's see the process of water cycle. The rainwater that is penetrating from the clouds will either run along the ground or get stored as groundwater. The water that runs along the ground flows into water bodies, and the water that is stored as groundwater will get drawn up by plants as well as transferred from leaves as water vapor. This water vapor form clouds. When clouds rise higher, the vapor condenses and changes into droplets, and this will eventually fall on the ground as rain. Now let's look at the man-made effects on water cycle. Man's activities are making drastic changes in atmosphere through pollution, which is altering rainfall patterns. Prolonged drought periods extending over years like the one happened in Africa, as well as causing floods like that of US. Next, let's look into carbon cycle. The carbon cycle is the biogeochemical cycle by which carbon is exchanged by the biosphere, pedosphere, geosphere, hydrosphere and atmosphere of the earth. Now, why is the carbon cycle so important? Carbon is the building block of both plants and animal tissues, helps in regulating and monitoring the percentage of oxygen and carbon dioxide in Earth's atmosphere. The whole mankind is dependent on the oxygen generated through this cycle. Now let's see the process of carbon cycle. Through photosynthesis, plants release oxygen into the atmosphere. Now, what is photosynthesis? In the presence of sunlight, plants take up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through their leaves. The plants combine carbon dioxide with water, which is absorbed by their roots from the soil in the presence of sunlight. They are able to form carbohydrates that contain carbon. Now, animals depend on this oxygen generated for respiration. Plants and animals release carbon dioxide during respiration. They also release a fixed amount of carbon dioxide during expiration as well as during death. Next one, oxygen cycle. Oxygen cycle refers to the movement of oxygen through the atmosphere, biosphere and the lithosphere. This cycle can be linked with carbon cycle. Now let's look into the process of oxygen cycle. Oxygen is taken up by plants and animals from the air during respiration. The plants return oxygen to the atmosphere during photosynthesis. There are several effects of man on oxygen cycle. The deforestation reduced oxygen levels in our atmosphere. Next one, nitrogen cycle. It is the biogeochemical cycle by which nitrogen is converted into multiple chemical forms as it circulates among atmosphere, terrestrial as well as marine ecosystems. Now, why is this nitrogen cycle so important? Nitrates are part of plants' metabolism, which help in forming new plant proteins. It also helps in synthesizing chlorophyll. It helps in converting nitrogen gas into another form as well as enriches the soil. Now let's see how this cycle altogether happens. Carnivorous animals feed on herbivorous animals. When animals deficit or die, the small soil animals break the waste material into smaller bits. Even though soil animals are neglected in food chain, they play a very important role. These smaller bites are further breeded into nutrients for the plants to absorb, and this is how the nitrogen cycle happens. And the last one is energy cycle. It can be depicted in the form of a food pyramid or energy pyramid. In the lower bottom lies producers. The plants are the producers, as they can grow by converting the sun's energy into different other components to satisfy their needs. And above them, in the middle portion, lies the first order consumers or herbivores. They are known as the first order consumers because they use the plants as their food. And in the apex portion lies the second order consumers or carnivores. They are second order consumers because they depend on herbivores, who are the consumers which depend on plants. And when plants and animals die, their material is returned to the soil after breaking into lower components by these small soil animals. Next, integration of cycles in nature. Together, the cycles are responsible for maintaining life on Earth. If mankind disturbs these cycles beyond the limits that nature can sustain, they will eventually break down and will lead to a degraded Earth on which man will not be able to survive. Now let's look into a quick recap of what all we have discussed. We understood that what ecosystem meant and several other cycles like the water cycle, its importance, man-made effects on it, as well as the same about carbon cycle, oxygen cycle, nitrogen cycle and energy cycle. And the last, we also had a look into the integration of cycles. Hope the session was clear. Thank you.